I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Denisha Price. I'm a Chapter Activities Coordinator at American Concrete Institute. And today our webinar will be on cybersecurity. Our speaker today is Jason Pennington. He is the Director of Information Systems and Warehouse Operations for American Concrete Institute. He has more than 2 decades of experience in information systems. Jason Pennington leads the department, making sure ACI systems are functional and secure. Jason has extensive experience in networking, system design, and support, as well as information security. Jason is the architect for all ACI networks, systems, and hardware. Please join me in welcoming Jason, and now he'll begin today's webinar presentation.
All right, thank you, Denisha. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm about to get started, so I'm going to turn my camera off while I do the webinar, and then I'll turn it back on at the end for any questions that you may have. All right. So first, my clicker ain't working. There we go. First, I wanted to go over some things that I can cover in this webinar and some of the items I cannot cover. Mainly, I'll be talking in generalizations. I cannot cover anything very specifically. I do not know your environment, so everything will need to be generalized. Also, what may be an acceptable risk to one business may not be an acceptable risk for another business. The goals for this webinar are to get you to think about improvements you can make to your cybersecurity posture. One thing you will learn, there is not one item that will make your cybersecurity infrastructure secure. It involves adding multiple layers of security. If you end up implementing one of these suggestions to your infrastructure, you are more secure than you were before. So having said that, let's get started. What is the definition of cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is the practice of protecting critical systems and sensitive information from digital attacks. The cost of a cybersecurity breach, IBM had a report in 2022 that showed the average cost of a data breach for a small business, which they classified as a company with less than 500 people, at $2.98 million in the United States. Unfortunately, the initial financial loss is just the beginning. Data breaches can also harm a business's reputation and lead to a loss of current and future customers. That means you should be paying attention to cybersecurity and being proactive in securing your cyber infrastructure. What is the reality of cybersecurity incident for you? While physical and cybersecurity share some of the same problems and solutions, cybersecurity, unlike a physical building that needs security, cybersecurity will usually be a bit tougher for most businesses. A physical building can be abused by anyone that is in proximity to that building, while cyber infrastructure can be abused by anyone with an internet connection. And this is absolutely happening. Your internet connection is constantly being probed and explored, looking for vulnerabilities and other digital reconnaissance. They may try to exploit these vulnerabilities, or they may record this information and return at a later time. They may note that you have a web server on your connection and its version, or you may have a certain type of router with a certain version. They may do some research on your router and determine the version you are running has a vulnerability that is exploited in a certain way. Or they may just wait, and a couple months later, they see a new vulnerability was announced for your router, and eventually they return and determine that your router hasn't been patched with the latest fixes. So that is just a small portion of what is happening out there. Email security and filtering. Over 75% of cyber attacks begin with an email. These types of attacks are usually phishing attacks and ransomware attacks. One of the recommendations we have is that you should look at training yourself and your staff on cybersecurity awareness. Cybersecurity awareness training will help you and your staff be more adept at spotting these phishing and ransomware attacks. If you're not already doing it, you should definitely implement multi-factor authentication on your email accounts. Multi-factor authentication combines two or more independent credentials, what the user knows, such as a password, what the user has, such as a security token, and what the user is by using biometric verification methods. By securing your email with MFA, you are securing a lot of other access. When you forget a password to a website, usually it will send a password reset to your email. By securing your email, you are somewhat securing these other accounts. Another item to investigate is email security filtering. There are products out there that before an email is delivered to the inbox that will run that email through a series of tests to make sure any attachments are safe to open, as well as the links are safe to click on. Another thing to investigate implementing is SPF, DKIM, and DMARC on any of your emailable domains. If email is set up for a domain, implementing these three protocols for that domain will provide some additional security for you and your staff, as well as your customers. SPF, which stands for Sender Policy Framework. This tells email servers what IP addresses should emails for this domain be sent from. DKIM, which stands for Domain Keys Identified Mail. This email authentication method adds a digital signature to outbound emails so the receiver knows that it was sent by the owner of the domain or not. DMARC, which stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. DMARC builds on top of DKIM and suggests what to do with mail that isn't legitimate from DKIM. All three of these email authentication protocols will help you and your customers trust emails that have your domain name on it. All three of these protocols are not required to send email out of a domain, but could help. Password. So the first thing I have to say is don't reuse passwords. You should create a unique password for each password you make. It is also bad practice to just add a number or symbol to a base password to make your unique passwords. It would be trivial for a hacker to figure that out. Definitely keep your personal passwords away from your business items. The reason for this advice is if you reuse passwords, a website or service gets compromised, they can then take that account information that they just obtained from the compromised site and plug that info into as many other sites they can think of. If you are reusing passwords, there's a good chance they can gain access to another system. We suggest going with 12-character passwords or longer. Use uppercase, lowercase, symbols, and numbers. The more characters, the better. With computing being so advanced these days, the time to crack a relatively strong 8-character password can be within 8 hours. A 12-character password can take up to 34,000 years with that same hardware. Make sure you're using uppercase and lowercase characters as well as numbers and symbols in that 12-character password. Again, if it's possible to use MFA, you are better off using it than without it. And finally, for the passwords category, we recommend that you use password managers when possible. You should definitely do some research on this and determine what is a good password manager, as not all password managers are created equal. And just so you are aware, there have been compromises to password managers as well. Backups. You should definitely be doing backups of your local infrastructure and possibly of your cloud infrastructure. If you have local infrastructure, such as a file storage on a local server and appliance, that file storage should be backed up. Those backups should be taken off site as well. Let's say your building caught fire. If your backups are stored in the same place, would they have survived the fire? Or a different scenario, if you're replicating data to say Google Drive or Dropbox as your backup, and let's just say your machine got some ransomware on it, that ransomware starts encrypting all of your files, and then those files replicate to Google or Dropbox. Would you be able to recover those files from before the ransomware? The best backup systems will create an immutable backup, which is a backup that cannot be changed. It is important to have multiple backups, as some of those ransomware systems will make everything appear to be fine, even though things are not. If you only have one backup, that backup may be from a time when the ransomware was active and you may not have that backup. If you have multiple backups, you increase the odds of having a clean, ransomware-free backup. Another reason for multiple backups, if you are not backing up to the cloud, that backup is going to be backed up to some sort of device, whether that device is a tape, a CD or DVD drive, or a hard drive. These devices sometimes fail, and if you only have one device and that fails, you have no backup. For cloud infrastructure, determine what your vendor actually does for you. Let's say you're using Microsoft Office 365. They provide email and online file storage through SharePoint and OneDrive. If Microsoft had an outage at one of its data centers, they have redundancy built into their system where your files would more than likely be safe from an incident like this. Now, let's say you have one of your employees was a victim of phishing and someone now has access to your employees' Office 365 data. And let's just say the hacker just wants to cause you a hard time. So they delete all of that email and all of your files. Is Microsoft able to restore your stuff? More than likely, they will not entertain that problem. And this is just one example of why you need to back up your cloud infrastructure. This is a pretty big gotcha for some people to learn this. Another aspect of backups, if you are backing up, are you able to restore these items? You should be able to periodically test your backups and make sure they are working and that you're able to restore a file or whatever it is you are backing up. There are also cloud backup systems, and while those can have their benefits, they can also have some problems as well. Like any vendor you do business with, if that vendor is in shaky financial shape, it may be best to find a different vendor. If the vendor goes out of business, your backups go out of business as well. So in summary, try to back up as much as you can, as often as you can. Ask your vendors what-if questions. Some systems may not be able to be backed up very easily. Maybe the answer there may be not a backup, but maybe exporting the data out of the system periodically as a backup. You may be okay with some risk of not backing up a system, and you may feel you can recreate that system easily enough. If you are doing that thinking, then you are doing well in terms of backups. And don't forget, test those backups. All right, antivirus. Some antivirus companies have moved away from the more traditional model of antivirus packages, which relied on a signature-based approach. The signature-based approach was one that the antivirus vendor would periodically update a file that their software would periodically download. That file then would detect signatures of other files on your machine, and if any of those files matched the signature, then it would think that file contained a virus or other type of malicious behavior. That is how the traditional antivirus software worked. It was signature or definition based. New antivirus software can use a different approach. While the signature-based approach worked well for its time, new approaches were developed to protect computers. New antivirus software is monitoring your system, the processes that are running on your system, what processes are talking to stuff on your network, and what processes are talking to on the internet. It can then decide to either allow that file to keep working, continue monitoring it, or stop it from working. The antivirus software is usually in communication with their servers, and changes can be made immediately. New antivirus software can use AI to assist with making those decisions. New antivirus software can have a large security team behind it. Their software is constantly sending information to them on the processes and the files that it comes across. And if their system sees something suspicious, they can make a change, and within minutes, their software can get that new direction and implement it. MSPs. If your chapter does not have a dedicated IT team, you may want to consider contacting a MSP, which is a managed service provider. A managed service provider is basically a contracted IT department. They can be as much or as little as you need them to be. They can potentially investigate your cybersecurity posture and help you improve on it, or they can give you guidance on how to increase your security posture. Security training. Cybersecurity training should be done periodically with you and your staff. This training will help you and your staff to be safer in the digital realm. This training usually breaks down complex IT topics so that you and your users can understand the problems and the appropriate actions when encountering those issues. It is very important that all staff are going through these training sessions. In the security realm, you are only as secure as your weakest link. Any of your staff could accidentally open a ransomware file and release that onto your network. For computers, updates and patches. For the computers you are using to manage your business, if you are running Windows, you should be running Windows updates on all your computers every month. Windows Updates is a service from Microsoft that updates your Windows installation to include all bug fixes, vulnerability fixes, and other updates. This includes any servers you may have as well as the workstations. Windows updates are released every month on the second Tuesday of the month. If you are running a Windows version that is not receiving security updates, then you should be working to get that Windows installation either updated to a Windows version that is still supported or replaced as it is vulnerable. If you are running a Mac, a Macintosh, or if you're running Linux, there should be similar utilities for those operating systems. And you should probably patch those monthly or at least quarterly as well. Not only should you be patching your Windows operating system, you should be patching programs as well. The programs may or may not include an auto-updating component built into their software. These days, most programs do include this, but if not, you should be looking into patching those programs manually and periodically. Also, for the non-Macintosh computers that you have, including servers, you should be updating the drivers and firmware on those systems periodically as well. These can usually be obtained from the manufacturer of the hardware. Let's see, routers, firewalls, and other hardware. If you're running any sort of servers or services from your network that are published or exposed to the internet, then you should probably be running a business class router or firewall. You should be periodically updating the firmware on that router or firewall as well to keep it up to date and to mitigate any security vulnerabilities that it may have had since it was last updated. Let's see. Any other hardware you are using, you should consider looking for updates on that hardware as well. So in conclusion, cybersecurity is not a one-time process. It takes continuous effort to be secure. It also takes continuous effort to be up to date. Incorporating most of these ideas in this webinar will give you a good foundation going forward, but you will need to periodically review those systems and your security services. You may also want to periodically engage an MSP to review your efforts and see if they can spot any weaknesses or deficiencies in your efforts. So that concludes my webinar. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type those into the question box.
Thank you, Jason. As Jason just mentioned, please use the question box if you do have any questions and submit your questions there. It looks like we do have one question that has come in the question box, Jason, and it's if you clicked on a phishing link and provided your password, what should be done about that?
Well, Denisha, you should definitely change your password immediately. And if you are reusing passwords, so you've typed this same password into other sites, you should definitely change that password on that other site as well. If you've given up your password, you should definitely change it ASAP.
Thank you. And it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So I do want to thank you again, Jason, for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're very busy maintaining ACI's systems.
Absolutely.
So thank you. And I also want to thank all of our chapter officers and directors who joined us today. I hope that you all were able to learn something valuable that you can apply to your own systems. I do also want to let everyone know we have another webinar coming up on July the 19th at 12 p.m. Eastern. It's on ethics, and the title of that webinar is Various Shades of Concrete. Of gray, I'm sorry, just like concrete. We have a great speaker by the name of Bill Rushing who will be presenting. He's an past ACI president. So if you haven't registered for that, I would suggest that you register for that webinar. But again, thank you all. I hope that everyone has a great day and take care.
Thank you, Denisha.
You're welcome.